Hi, this is Ruthie Cohen-Joyner with YourTappingJourney.com, and today I'm interviewing Jenny Johnston, the founder of Quantum EFT, and I'm going to let Jenny talk with you about Quantum EFT and what she does, and then we'll get going.
Hi, great to be with you, Ruthie. I'm an EFT Universe trainer. I became a trainer in trainer in 2010. So I was the first one in the Southern Hemisphere. I'm in Australia, and who became a trainer for EFT Universe. Now, when I first discovered EFT, it was 2005, and I was doing a hypnotherapy diploma. And one of the students introduced me to EFT. Now, I've always had a very spiritual background. I am also a past life regression hypnotherapist, and I follow the teachings of Cryon. And Cryon talks about how you can really go into your Akash, your past lives, to help you with this lifetime, not only by releasing things that are in the way, but also going and finding lifetimes that have a positive influence or positive experiences for this lifetime. And so what I did was I combined all of this, my EFT knowledge, my hypnotherapy, my spiritual background, the teachings of Cryon, and I created Quantum EFT for the soul. And in that, I've obviously written 2 books, Your Tapping into Past Lives and Your Past Life Inheritance, and they have many stories of my clients and how they have come to have magnificent changes in this life by not only working on things that are going on now, but releasing them back through all of their lifetimes. And in that, we've also been able to, once we've released things that are affecting them now, go and find positive things from other lifetimes, positive experiences, positive beliefs, and bring them back and activate them now. So in regards to weight, of course, if that's something that's affecting you now in this lifetime, then we don't stop with how that's affecting you now in this lifetime. We will look at what other lifetimes are also influencing your weight in this lifetime, and look at what are influencing you in a negative way. And obviously weight is often a protection.
Yes.
And if somebody has had severe traumas, not only in this life, but in other lifetimes, then we will look at those traumas and how they may be contributing to you holding on to weight or feeling protected by weight. There may be lifetimes where you've starved as well. And it's like, you might come across somebody who says, I'm hungry all the time, or I'm starving. And they'll say those words, I'm starving. And so we'll ask our guides and our higher self as we're tapping to go back and show us the lifetimes where we did starve to death, where we did feel like there wasn't enough, or where it was maybe in a lifetime a symbol of wealth, of security, by being very, filled with weight, and have them then disconnected so that we can create a whole new way of being around weight without it being influenced by other lifetimes.
Well, you've brought up many different things. I could ask many questions about that, but I do want to go back to what you were saying about cultural differences in weight. So and you were talking about positive things from past lives. So that's interesting to me, because I hadn't thought about the idea of if you had a positive life, or maybe you were royalty of some type, and it was a culture that really revered being really heavy, then you could, I guess, subconsciously, or holding on to the belief that abundance and weight go together. Is that sort of what you mean?
Yeah, because a lot of, for example, what's just popped into my head, I don't know if you've ever watched the movie Apocalypto, but it was back in Mayan times. Okay. And the royalty who lived at the top of these huge you know, these huge pyramid things. And when they did sacrifices to the gods and chopped off people's heads and hearts and things, you know, it was quite brutal. But the wealthy, you know, the rest of the population was starving, but the royalty, the people that were closest to God, the high priestesses and the royal family, so to speak, were very, very plump. And it was a sign of wealth and royalty. It was, you know, I'm abundant and you're not. And so that sort of thing could also play as, you know, I'm not starving. I'm not one of the starving rabble. I'm wealthy. Look at me. Look at me by a sign of wealth and a sign of prosperity was that you had plenty of food to eat. And so you showed it.
Interesting. So, and asking Mike, I brought up the subconscious. So do you think, Jenny, that we're carrying all these things in our subconscious and they're part of how we make our choices today?
Well, it's probably not so much subconscious. I mean, subconscious would play a part in that, but Cryon teaches that the 97%, what they used to call junk DNA, is actually the DNA that instructs the rest of our DNA. It has all the information for the 3% genome physical DNA. Okay. And it's in this quantum or multi-dimensional layers of DNA where all of our lifetimes are stored, where all of the information at a soul level is stored from all of our lifetimes. And that includes the times when we were in trauma and the positive things of the times when we felt abundant. And so at a multi-dimensional DNA layer level, we are wanting to be safe and protected and abundant. And if we'd had lifetimes like that, where in that abundance, we had plenty of food, we had plenty of weight, and it was a symbol and a sign to the rest of the world that, look, I am abundant, wealthy, above you, safe, secure, then your DNA is telling that to your body at a subconscious and multi-conscious level. And so why would your body want to lose weight when you have that information being told to the DNA?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I've heard junk DNA, but I don't know that much about it. So I want to ask you, today's epigenetics that we've learned from Bruce Lipton and others, does what we've learned about epigenetics, meaning our beliefs and our practices such as meditation, tapping, etc., would that affect junk DNA in the same way it does our regular genetics, or is that completely different?
Yeah, that's what epigenetics is. Epigenetics is other than our three-dimensional DNA. So it's what is influencing that. And what is influencing that is so many different things at a multi-dimensional level. Things that we can't see, but you know, we can't see gravity, but we know it's there. We can't see air, but we know it's there. We can't see the multi-dimensional layers of our DNA, but we know that they're there. And we know that meditation and the hands-on healing and so many other things influence our DNA. So it's epigenetics, so it's outside of our genetics. And same with the multi-dimensional layers of our DNA. I think the best way that Cryon described it is that if you were an alien and came down to Earth and found speakers and an amplifier system, and you heard noise coming out of the speakers, you would think, oh, the speakers are very important. They have noise coming from them, but this amplifier, that's just junk. It just sits there. It doesn't seem to do anything. Gotcha. Right? Yeah. However, it's the amplifier that's giving all the instructions. It's the main engine, and it's the speaker that expresses that. And it's the same as our DNA. The multi-dimensional levels of our DNA are where all the instructions, where all the meaty stuff comes from, and the three-dimensional DNA is just where that 3% is where it is expressed. That's the physical part that expresses it. So what I do with quantum EFT for the soul is we combine EFT and past life regression, but mostly the whole time our intention is, and we speak out loud to the multidimensional layers of our DNA, and we include speaking to higher self and our guides and speaking to ourselves as a soul and as a being of light who has full free choice. And once we find what's going on at a soul level in other lifetimes, that is impacting us now. And sometimes we don't find it, we just instruct it to be released, and it's no longer serving us. Everyone's different. Sometimes people will be very visual, and as we're tapping and expressing this, like, where does this come from? People will get visions of it quite vividly, and then and where they feel it in the body, and then we release it and let it go. Or if that does not occur, we will just instruct our DNA to process and release whatever is no longer serving us in this body, in this lifetime, that relates to holding on to weight.
Okay. Interesting.
So it's very much instructive. We don't speak to that part of our body, and that part of our body has a consciousness, just like all parts of our body. And our body goes on merrily on its own way, thinking it's doing the right thing according to our history, whereas we haven't actually looked at that history and said, actually, that no longer serves me. It's a bit like doing a defrag on the computer, or going through all your files on the computer and going, oh, that used to be really good, but I need to update that program now, or that program I need to delete now. And it's the same thing with our body, is like there's a whole lot of programs that are still running that were really good in medieval times for us, but they're outdated now. They don't suit this lifestyle, this energy, this vibration. And there might have been lifetimes, you know, when you're starved, when you were ostracized, burnt at the stake, all of these things where you didn't feel safe, you didn't feel part of a community. And they will influence the same sort of thing that might be going on in this lifetime, where you might be afraid to step into a certain role in case you are ostracized, thrown out of the community, persecuted, left, cast aside to starve to death. And so in your own business, you might go, no, I'm not going to let, at a multi-conscious, subconscious level, you might be going, no, I need to be safe and secure, and I need plenty of weight on me. I don't want to starve to death again. I don't want to be cast aside like I'm the black sheep of the community, all of that sort of thing. So when I work with particularly people, and I guess the majority have also been women who want to work in the healing fields, and they've had history of doing that in other lifetimes, and it hasn't gone down well.
Yes. And
so there's a part of their body going, don't do that again, don't do that again. And make sure that you've got plenty of security around you. Make sure you've got plenty of food. Make sure you're safe. And so we address all of that. You know, gotcha. Weight, people tend to say, let's work on weight, or come for a weight issue, but I never look at the person as working on weight. Sure, we'll look at cravings, we'll look at what's going on, but I look at the whole person. And when you say the whole person, it's not just the whole person in this lifetime. I look at the whole person as a soul.
So I want to ask you a soul question, and I may be looking at this differently than you do, so I hope you can help me look at this in a way that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I've been dealing with issues for my personal issues since 13 is when I first had an awareness. But then when I look back, I could find times from 8 years old and 5 years old, et cetera. And it feels like it's been my whole life. But what's interesting is weight issues that have actually led to my spiritual growth, if you will. My whole spiritual life came from dealing with my own eating and weight issues. So my question to you is, and I'm not the only one, I've had other clients say that, is it possible that our souls create a problem in a lifetime specifically to get us to look at bigger issues or connect divine, etc.? Is that, am I asking that in a way where it makes sense to you, and that you can answer that?
It does. It makes complete sense. It's like some of the work I've done, I've also taken people to the planning committees, like the planning sessions of souls, where they're planning with other souls and creating soul agreements for the next lifetime or for our next future lifetimes. So it's about looking at, and a lot of the work that I do with the soul is looking at what is their soul contract. Obviously also with weight issues being a protection, there's been a lot of cases of sexual abuse in this lifetime. And once we clear all the trauma of that, and there's a lot of physical, three-dimensional, emotional trauma that's gone on that we need to clear first, and then we can look at it at a soul level. And rather than going into the forgiveness mode, which may be difficult, I get people into the soul understanding mode of, this is something we created together at a soul level. We planned for this at a soul level, and even though my human self doesn't understand it, it's brought me to my knees in order to self-investigate, in order to find my spirituality, in order to heal myself. And in that way, you can thank the soul of that person for going through with their plan. They played their part role, their part well, their soul role really well, just as it had been created by both of us. So we take things to a soul level and say, yeah, they played their part really well, that perpetrator role. You know, that soul really did a good job and really played a number on me to get me to this place where I had to self-investigate.
Yeah, and I want to just say, since you're bringing this up, that for those of you that are interested in this, one source that I have found that is really good at explaining is Neil Donald Walsh's Children, The Little Soul in the Sun. And you can actually find it being read on YouTube. And so I've referred several clients to that to help them understand that if someone was sexually by somebody, that they did have a soul contract, and that person was actually helping them, and getting to understanding that is kind of wrapping your brain around that. It's a little confusing for us mere humans. So
exactly, and you can't get someone to that place when they're still in the physical and human emotional trauma of it, at fight or flight response. So that's why EFT is great to be able to do that, and release things at a human level, at a DNA level, and then go to the soul level work. And it basically naturally flows into that once you've cleared everything that was very traumatizing at a human level. And often I will say that, you know, even though my human consciousness doesn't understand the soul contract, why would I make a soul contract like that? My soul knew, and my soul chose it, and my soul agreed to it, and my soul created it with this soul. And even though my human self goes, why would I do that? What was I thinking? You know, there is some form of an understanding then that I created this for a reason.
Yes.
And I choose to find the soul reason. and
Gotcha.
step through that, the soul learning and the soul lesson. And often I will take people up into higher learning, into that space between lives, and ask the masters and the guides and their higher self or their soul, what is the higher learning and lesson? Which is what I do in between lifetimes. When we go to past lives, we always review that lifetime in that in-between space and say, what's the higher learning and the lesson? And so we can do that even when we're in our lifetime now.
Okay, so Jenny, I have to ask you, because I'm guessing that there's some people listening that are going, I don't have a clue what you're talking about, who haven't studied all this.
Yes.
And I'm guessing that you attract people who are further advanced in their spiritual journeys so that this all makes sense. But is your first book a good resource for people to start looking at this, or do they need to go like to Brian Weiss's book, Many Lives, Many Masters, or where's a good place for somebody who's brand new to understanding all this soul contract and between lives and all of that? What do you recommend?
Yeah, my first book, Your Past, Tapping into Past Lives, is a good way to start, because it tells of my journey as well, my story and my journey and how I got into it.
Okay.
But it also gives stories of, in their own words, of people who came to my workshops, and explains how when we were focused on something that was going on now, and some of them spontaneously dropped into past lives. You know, like one lady, when I was working with her, and it was all about fear, and fear was coming up, and I just said, what does that fear feel like? And she said, like a silver bullet through the heart. And I said, when did that silver bullet go through the heart? And she goes, Gallipoli, like just came out of her mouth, and she was going, wow, like, and then we just went into that. Other times something similar has occurred where they've just when I've gone, when did this first occur, or when was this original, you know, when did it first occur in you? And they will spontaneously go to a past life, and they'll go, oh my God, I'm in the Vatican, or, you know, and it will often surprise people when you say to go to the origin of it. And the same thing happened with Brian Weiss in Many Lives, Many Masters, when he took Catherine and said, go to the origin, and bang, she was in past lives. So, but mostly I go, you know, I ask guides and higher self and the multidimensional layers of your DNA, where did this first occur? So I can become aware of it and release it and let it go through all of my lifetimes. So, but yeah, my first book's a good place to start. And like you said about reading the book by Neil Donald Walsh. Yeah. There's also there's a particular channeling, or a couple of them, by Cryon. When you go to cryon.com and then free audio, and then go to the parables, there is the parable of Angela and her guide friends, and also Jessica the Angry, where it particularly speaks of soul contracts and coming back, and also your guides that are there with you. So those two channelings, and also one in 2010 called the Akashic System. And they're channelings that will help people understand why I do this work and what it's based on spiritually. And it's backed up by many other people and many scientists. Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden, they often travel with Cryon, with Lee Carroll, who channels Cryon, and they talk about how the channelings of Cryon are backed up scientifically. And so how science and spirituality meet. In fact, there is a seminar or a weekend coming up shortly in, I think it's Vancouver Island, where
it's in called June.
Yes, in June, and it's called where Science Meets Spirituality, and it's got Lynn Taggart, Bruce Lipton,
and Joe Dispenza,
with Lee Carroll, and that will be amazing. Yeah.
Yes, I would love to go. It's definitely on my hope to make happen in 2018 list. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
totally agree. Well, this has been fascinating, Jenny. I know we haven't talked that much about weight specifically, but this has been beautiful to kind of open people's eyes up to different things and
Mm.
past
And weight is,
lives.
yeah, and
Go ahead.
weight is part of the person. So, you know,
Right,
it's instead of just specifically focusing on weight, we look at, well, how is weight part of you as a whole person and as
right.
part of you as a whole soul? Where does this jigsaw puzzle piece fit?
Yes, and I see weight as a symptom, not a cause. So, for whatever's not working in your life in
Mm-hmm.
whatever way, then, you may be turning to food to deal with your feelings or the fact that you're not expressing what you need to express. We're
Exactly.
stuffing down literally the words that we need to say. So,
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of things that definitely when I work with people on weight, it is rarely about weight. I mean, we
exactly.
do
And
talk a little bit about it, but not much.
yeah, and very particularly listening to the words they say around it. Like I said, when people say they don't like feeling hungry, and they're often saying I'm starving instead of I'm hungry, or yeah, you listen to their words to say I'm not heard or I can't say that, and so yeah, they are stuffing their words down.
Yes. And then there's a generational piece of it. My background is being Jewish, and I really think there's Holocaust stuff and my fear of being hungry. So even
Yes.
though I wasn't alive during the Holocaust, I think it affects me. So, trying to understand exactly what's generational, what's past life, what's this life, it really
Yeah,
doesn't matter, I guess, where it comes from. It's just
exactly. It's about looking at
feeling it.
where does this come from, and investigating that, and speaking to the multidimensional layers of your DNA. And your physical DNA does hold generational DNA, but also Cryon talks about how we do reincarnate in families and quite often culturally.
Okay.
And one of the questions I will often ask people is, do you have a fascination with a particular culture? Or, there's a story in Tapping into Past Lives where a lady who was always fascinated with natives and dark-skinned women with dark hair. She was blonde. And she even went, as a child, asked her mum took her doll to a doll hospital and had the hair taken out and black hair put in. And then as soon as she was old enough, she dyed her hair black, and she was always going to solariums and trying to be as brown as possible. And of course, the first lifetime we went to, she was a Fijian woman, I think, a native. But yeah, she was just always fascinated by native women with dark hair, and this is where the lifetime took us to. Other people will say, I love a certain type of food, and it's because they lived in that culture or that city.
Very
Mm.
interesting. So I'm just going to ask one more question about that, and then we'll just kind of wrap this up. Do you find, you did say that we kind of either reincarnate into our families or into our cultures. Do you find that people pick 2 or 3 different cultures and that's kind of it, or that people have a wide variety, or I guess it varies?
Every soul is different, but
Okay.
particularly the Jewish race, Cryon talks about them reincarnating as Jews, that race stays pure.
Interesting.
So there'll be a lot of that. I've got a lady that comes to my monthly tapping groups, which are online as well, and she's German, and she still holds a whole lot of guilt as being German.
Yes.
And it does go back generationally, and she brought that in at a soul level in this lifetime, very much so, by being born out of wedlock to a mother who was very young, and the whole family covered up with guilt around it by having the older sister bring her up. So the older sister brought her up as her own, whereas the younger sister was her mum, and she couldn't understand why her so-called mum didn't really love her and why she had a great relationship with her younger auntie.
Interesting. Very
But
interesting.
there's so guilt for feeling like she was even born and alive, right? That was set up by her soul to say, you haven't learnt this lesson yet. This guilt, this whatever's going on at a German cultural level, and whenever we tapped on Holocaust or anything that went back further, she was always very deeply sobbing from it.
Do you feel like certain souls are trying to carry the guilt or the shame or whatever of a whole culture then?
Their involvement in that culture, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's, in my latest book, Your Past Life Inheritance, there's a really good story of a German guy in America who very vividly remembers a past life as a commandant, and it's called The Beekeeper and the Commandant, and he wrote a poem about it, or a story about it, and as he read it to me, he was very emotional, and so we went through it at a quantum EFT level and released all that emotional connection to it. But his story and the video of part of that session, the link to the video is in that book. But yeah, as a beekeeper, he'd retired from World War One.
Okay.
And he was in his 60s, and he was in the countryside and loving being a beekeeper. And then he was called by the German government out of retirement to be a commandant, and he just couldn't understand it. He had to do it. Couldn't understand it. He saved thousands and thousands and thousands, got people out, but still had that effect of what he saw. And he had a particular phrase, I can't remember it, but what he saw. And in this lifetime, he has macular degeneration.
Yeah,
and so didn't want to see the stuff he saw. He didn't want to see again. And he was getting towards his 60s. And it's like his eyes did not want to see what he saw in that lifetime. So we worked on that.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And it's very interesting how when our body ticks a certain age, that it relates to another lifetime when you were that age in another lifetime.
Makes sense.
In my latest book, there's also a lady who had massive headaches, migraines, and then all of a sudden at a certain age, she wanted to shift from being a psychologist into being in business, and the headaches got really worse. When we went back, it was because at that age, he had been a businessman in London and was killed on the way to a business deal, massive head injuries from a car accident at that age. And so when she turned that age in this lifetime, she suddenly had this, I've got to be in business, and the migraines increased.
Interesting.
So her DNA remembered that. And so we released all of that, and the migraines have gone down. There's still some headaches, but not to the extreme that they were. And now she's doing both. It wasn't she wasn't driven to be doing just one thing. So yeah, there's many stories of how other lifetimes plays such a bigger role in our life now that we just don't tend to look at or understand. And so that's why for whatever issue you've got, I say look at you as a whole soul, not just what's going on in this lifetime. That's the tip of the iceberg. It's the only part that's showing right now.
Very interesting. Well, Jenny, as we bring this to a close, if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about your work, could you share your website and then whatever you've got coming up in the next few months or whatever that people might be interested in?
Sure. I've got my website, www.quantumeft.com.au. So AU is for Australia. And there's a workshops page. And in that workshops page, I also have the online workshops, which are live online on Zoom, just like we are now. 6 weeks of 90-minute sessions. And that's with people all around the world. The next one's coming up in April. There's also a YouTube channel I have called EFT Australia, one word. And in that, I have many free videos. Okay. Where you can look at the Quantum EFT playlist. There's a whole lot of different playlists, and that includes normal EFT as well as Quantum EFT, as well as some of the past life regressions that some people have shared. And then in my books, there are links to the videos from the stories of the books, and you can get those on Amazon. So Your Past Life Inheritance and Tapping into Past Lives, both available Kindle and book on Amazon.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today, Jenny. This was fascinating.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today. I know we didn't stick exactly to weight, but I hope you learned something very exciting and new. And again, this is Ruthie Cohen-Joyner at yourtappingjourney.com. And thanks for joining us.